Remember when every street in your neighborhood looked like a time capsule with rows of identical houses that somehow all felt like home? There was a time in Canada when housing wasn't just about shelter. It was about building dreams on victory lots, raising families in side splits with their maze of stairs, and watching hockey night in Canada from basement rec rooms with orange shag carpet. Today, we're opening the doors to 10 old Canadian house styles no longer built today. Whether you climbed icy outdoor stairs to your Montreal apartment, played road hockey in front of a Vancouver Special, or remember your grandparents' tiny wartime house with the steep attic bedroom, you're about to walk down memory lane. The Victory House picture. A modest rectangular house with a steep gable roof, barely 1,000 square feet, sitting at the end of a tree-lined street. This was the Victory House, Canada's answer to the post-war housing crisis. Between 1945 and 1960, more than 300,000 of these simple, 1.5-story homes sprouted across Canadian communities, often nicknamed strawberry box houses because of their compact, boxy shape. By the 1960s and 70s, these weren't new anymore. They were the old houses where young families scraped together down payments on modest incomes. You'd recognize them instantly. Clapboard or brick exterior, a tiny front stoop barely big enough for 2 people, and upstairs bedrooms tucked right into the roof with sloped ceilings and knee walls that made standing up a careful dance. Inside, life was cozy and cramped. Kids rode bikes in tight circles on short driveways. Moms hung laundry on narrow side yards where clotheslines stretched between posts. By the 1980s, many families converted those stuffy attics into teen bedrooms, adding wood paneling and posters of rock bands to walls that followed the roof line. The single bathroom meant morning lineups. The small eat-in kitchen had barely enough room for a table and 4 chairs. But it was home, and it was affordable. These Victory houses vanished from new construction because they were built for crisis, not comfort. As Canada's economy grew and household expectations shifted, buyers wanted more space, even as family sizes shrank. CMHC design catalogs moved toward larger bungalows and 2-story homes. The ultra-compact footprint that made sense in 1945 felt outdated by the 1960s. Developers stopped building them, and a whole generation of starter homes became yesterday's architecture. The CMHC 1.5-story small house opened a government booklet from 1950, and you could pick your dream home like ordering from a Sears catalog. These were the CMHC 1.5-story standardized house plans, published in design booklets and used across Canada to build thousands of nearly identical suburban homes. The magic was in the simplicity. Ordinary Canadian families could flip through pages of floor plans, point to Model C or Plan 7, and have a builder construct it on their lot in a growing suburb. The houses followed a formula: steep roofs without dormers, simple rectangular footprints, small eat-in kitchens, combined living and dining rooms, and bedrooms tucked into the roof with those characteristic low ceilings and slanted walls. For kids growing up in the 1960s, these houses had a particular feel. Rain sounded loud when it hit the roof right above your bed. You learned to duck when walking through upstairs hallways. Summer nights in those top-floor bedrooms were sweltering because heat rose and stayed trapped under the rafters. After-school snacks happened at laminate kitchen tables. One bathroom served the whole family. Sleepovers meant cousins piled into stuffy upstairs rooms, whispering past bedtime while parents watched TV downstairs. The neighborhoods looked almost copy and paste, but families made them their own. Porch chairs appeared, garden gnomes multiplied, hockey sticks leaned against back doors. The houses were modest, but they were yours. As incomes rose through the 1960s and land on urban fringes stayed cheap, builders shifted to 1-story ranches and full 2-story models with bigger rooms and attached garages. The 1.5-story format started looking cramped and old-fashioned. CMHC's newer pattern books featured different designs, and this catalog suburb style quietly disappeared from new construction by the late 1960s. Telling and preparing this video took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the video. The suburban bungalow low, wide and utterly Canadian, the suburban bungalow defined the dream of the 1950s through the 1970s. Picture a one-story detached home with a shallow pitched roof, a big picture window facing the street, and either a carport or a simple concrete driveway leading to the side of the house. This was the house where you could drive right up to your dream. The car sat in the carport while kids played in the backyard. Barbecues happened on poured concrete patios. The layout was straightforward. Front living room with that massive window letting in afternoon sun, a small separate kitchen, 3 tight bedrooms down a short hallway, and often a finished rec room in the basement with wood paneling and a boxy television set on a stand. Saturday mornings meant cartoons on the living room floor, sunlight streaming through that picture window. Dad tinkered in the carport with his toolbox. Mom yelled, "Supper!" out the back screen door, her voice carrying across the yard where you were climbing trees or playing road hockey. This is the house burned into Gen X memories, the backdrop of childhood that feels universal across Canadian suburbs from Scarborough to Surrey. But one-story houses eat up land. For every square foot of living space, you need a square foot of property. As urban land prices climbed through the 1980s and 90s and cities pushed for denser development, the economics stopped working. Developers pivoted to 2-story houses and townhomes that stacked more living space on smaller lots. Energy efficiency rules pushed designs toward attached garages and better insulation. The simple bungalow with its carport and sprawling footprint became a luxury only older suburbs could afford, and new builders stopped putting them up. The side split, stairs. Walk into a side split and you're immediately faced with choices, up or down. These suburban houses, wildly popular from the late 1950s through the 1970s, featured split levels with short half-flights of stairs. You'd enter on a mid-level, then climb a few steps to reach bedrooms, or descend a few steps to living rooms or rec rooms. Often the garage tucked under one side, heated and integrated into the home's footprint. Side splits solved 2 huge mid-century problems. First, where to put the car without building a separate garage. Second, how to build on hilly or sloped suburban lots without massive excavation. The design let the living room sit slightly elevated while the garage nestled below, all fitting neatly onto land that wasn't perfectly flat. For families in the 1960s through 80s, living in a side split meant navigating a maze of half floors. The TV room sat a few steps down from the entry. Bedrooms were a few steps up. Laundry facilities hid somewhere in between, maybe off a landing. Kids raced each other up and down the split staircases. Birthday parties spilled from the elevated living room down to the rec room with its lower ceiling and basement feel. Wet snowsuits and winter boots piled up at the cramped mid-level entry because there was no proper mudroom. The side split vanished as tastes shifted toward open-concept main floors and easier accessibility. Multiple short stair runs became nightmares for aging homeowners. People with mobility challenges found them impossible. New buyers in the 1990s wanted fewer level changes and bigger, connected kitchen dining living spaces. Builders stopped offering classic side split plans, and the half-stair maze became a relic of suburban history. The backsplit. Think of the backsplit as the side split's adventurous cousin. Instead of level stepping sideways, they stepped down toward the backyard. This style boomed in 1960s and 70s Ontario subdivisions, built by major developers who saw profit in maximizing space on sloped lots. From the street, a backsplit looked modest, even boring. But walk around to the back, and the house dropped into extra levels, often with walkout family rooms leading straight to the yard. Many had sliding glass doors opening onto decks or patios, sometimes overlooking above-ground pools that were the height of suburban luxury. Inside, the layout had personality. The family room sat half a story below the kitchen level, usually carpeted in orange or brown shag, with wood-paneled walls and a big TV. Weekend routines played out predictably. Parents watching hockey night. In Canada downstairs, beer on the side table, while teenagers snuck in through the backyard door to avoid questions about curfew. The backsplit suffered the same fate as its split-level relatives. Complex interior levels meant costly renovations and tricky accessibility as original owners aged. As tract builders streamlined designs in the 1990s, simple two-story boxes and full-height walkout basements proved cheaper to design, build, and sell. The classic backsplit format disappeared from new home price lists, leaving behind thousands of existing homes with their distinctive step-down floor plans. The high ranch raised bungalow. Enter a high ranch and you're standing in a split foyer, facing a choice: stairs going up to the main living area or stairs going down to a lower level that's partly above ground with real windows. This was the raised bungalow, hugely popular in the 1970s and 80s, offering maximum square footage on modest suburban lots. The genius was in the elevation. By raising the bungalow higher off the ground, builders created a lower level that felt livable, not like a dark cellar. Full-sized windows let in daylight. Families used the space for rec rooms, extra bedrooms, home offices, or suites for grandparents. It was perfect for big families, multi-generational households, or anyone who needed flexibility. Many Canadians remember that split foyer entry clearly. You'd walk in and immediately decide up to the formal living room and bedrooms, or down to where the real life happened. Basement birthday parties had daylight streaming through those big windows. Teens claimed the lower level as their territory, hanging posters and playing music without bothering parents upstairs. Grandparents could live downstairs with dignity and light, not buried in darkness. By the late 1980s, though, high ranches fell out of favor. Two-story houses with full second floors became the suburban standard. They looked more impressive from the street with grand front entrances instead of modest split foyers. Every bedroom could have proper window views. Builders found them easier to market to buyers who wanted traditional layouts. The high ranch, practical as it was, stopped appearing in new subdivision plans. The Vancouver Special. If you grew up in Vancouver or the Lower Mainland between the mid-1960s and mid-1980s, you know the Vancouver Special instantly. 2 stories, front-gabled, boxy shape, shallow balcony across the front, low-pitched roof, stucco and brick exterior, main living quarters upstairs, and a secondary suite on the ground floor. Thousands of these distinctive houses went up fast and cheap, serving immigrant families and a booming population. The Vancouver Special was designed for efficiency, not beauty. Maximize floor space on small city lots. Build quickly with standard materials. Create rental income potential with that ground floor suite. For many families, especially new immigrants in the 70s and 80s, these houses were stepping stones to ownership and security. Home life in a Vancouver Special had its own rhythm. Laundry flapped on the narrow front balcony. Grandparents or cousins lived in the ground floor suite, cooking their own meals in a separate kitchen. Upstairs, wall-to-wall carpet-covered floors and aluminum-framed windows let in traffic noise from nearby arterials. Kids shared bubble tea or orange crush on the balcony. Aunties cooked in both kitchens, and extended families gathered for dinners that stretched between floors. But Vancouver residents started calling them eyesores. The repetitive, bulky look dominated streets, and architectural critics argued they lacked character. In 1985, the city of Vancouver tightened zoning rules, limiting how much of a lot could be covered by building. The regulations effectively ended mass construction of Vancouver Specials. Almost overnight, this defining housing form stopped being built, frozen in time, as a controversial piece of the city's heritage. The classic Montreal plex. With street stairs, Montreal's residential streets have a look unlike anywhere else in Canada. Duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes with stacked flats and dramatic wrought iron staircases spiraling up from the sidewalk to upper floors. These exterior stairs, often twisty and steep, became the city's visual signature. These plexes packed families into walkable urban neighborhoods. Each unit had its own entrance, accessed by climbing those metal stairs. Balconies faced the street, creating a culture of front yard sociability. Kids played directly under the stairs, using the metal handrails as jungle gyms. In the 1960s through 80s, waves of Francophone, Anglophone, and immigrant families grew up in these upper-story apartments. Daily life meant hauling groceries up outdoor steps, slippery with ice and slush in winter. Parents balanced shopping bags while gripping cold railings. Neighbors chatted from balcony to balcony, conversations floating across the street like vertical porches. Summer meant sitting out front with a cold drink, watching the neighborhood flow by. Winter meant chipping ice off those stairs and hoping you didn't slip. But modern building codes and accessibility standards made the classic plex staircase increasingly difficult to reproduce. Safety regulations pushed for enclosed or interior stairs. Fire codes demanded different configurations. Mobility requirements meant elevators or ground-level access. New multi-unit buildings in Montreal sometimes reference plexes aesthetically, but those steep outdoor spiral stairs right on the sidewalk, they're rare in new construction, preserved only in the city's older neighborhoods where they remain iconic. The company townhouse drive through older resource towns in Cape Breton, Northern Ontario, or other mining and mill communities, and you'll see them. Rows of nearly identical small houses, often Gothic Revival influenced, built by resource companies for their workers from the late 1800s through the early 20th century. By the 1960s and 70s, these company houses were already old, but still very much lived in. Miners' families, mill workers' kids, and their grandchildren called these compact homes their own. For anyone who visited grandparents down home in coal country or steel towns, this was the backdrop: simple, sturdy houses marching along streets named for numbered collieries or company divisions. Everyday life in these neighborhoods had texture. Clotheslines stretched between closely packed backyards, shirts and sheets flapping in industrial winds. Shift workers trudged home in the dark, lunch pails in hand. Everyone's dad worked at the same mine or mill. Everyone knew everyone. The houses were basic, sometimes cold, often needing repair, but they held communities together. The company town housing model faded mid-century. Labor laws changed. Governments shifted housing policy away from company ownership. New resource projects after the 1960s relied on private market housing or temporary work camps rather than permanent company-built rows. The model of employers constructing entire streets of worker houses simply stopped. What remains are heritage streetscapes in aging resource towns, preserved more by circumstance than by design. The Slag concrete bungalow. In certain Canadian steel cities, you'll find an unusual housing experiment: small ranch-style bungalows built with slag aggregate concrete, using industrial waste from steel production as part of the building material. These homes blended practicality with thrift, turning local byproducts into walls and foundations. In the 1950s and 60s, these bungalows fit seamlessly into working-class neighborhoods where nearly everyone had ties to the mill. Interiors looked like any other modest home: linoleum floors, formica kitchen tables, small bedrooms, and basements that smelled slightly different, a mustiness that came from those slag walls. Kids growing up in these houses often had no idea their home was built from the same material glowing in piles near the plant where their fathers worked. Life inside was ordinary. Families ate dinner at small kitchen tables. Kids did homework in shared bedrooms. Parents watched TV in cramped living rooms. The houses weren't fancy, but they were solid, affordable, and local, built with materials sourced right from the community's primary industry. As environmental and health awareness grew, slag-based construction lost its appeal. Questions arose about durability, insulation performance, and potential contaminants. New building standards favored conventional materials. Steel-making technologies changed, and the byproducts changed with them. By the 1970s, the experimental phase of slag concrete housing ended. Builders stopped using it, and this unusual chapter in Canadian housing history closed. So there you have it, 10 house styles that built Canadian childhoods but won't be built again. If this video brought back memories of climbing those stairs, playing in those backyards, or visiting Grandma's place, do us a favor, smash that like button and subscribe.